Hello everybody, my name is Justin. Welcome back to the studio, and in this video I'm going to show you how to get the perfect stitch on the front and the back. So it should be pretty obvious to anybody who's stitched up a wallet, bag, leather good, whatever the case may be, that the front side, the side that we've punched from, looks different than the back side. The reason for that is because when we punch from the front side, call it the front side, the hole's getting opened up, and on the back side the hole isn't as wide as the front side because most of the irons that we use have a tapered tooth. So the result is a wider hole on, let's say, the top side or the front side of the project and a smaller hole on the bottom side. So the result is that we can see which side you've punched from, and the stitching looks different from the front to the back. The front side is usually cleaner, with the back side being a little bit more tighter in the spacing because the hole isn't as wide, there's less room for the thread to sit. So the question is, how do we get a clean backside stitch that's as clean as the front side? The way I do that is what's called a double punching. So to double punch, it's fairly straightforward. We basically punch each of the pieces before they're glued together. So yes, this is more punching, but the results, as you'll see by the end of this video, speak for themselves. So what I'm comparing here is 3.38 French style stitching chisels with 0.4 millimeter linen thread. Different combinations in stitch spacing, using poly thread that's waxed. It may end up with a slightly different outcome, but this one I think is going to show you the potential for double punching your projects. Also, this is not limited to flat wallets. I have punched all of the handbags I've ever made. Most of them, I should say, have all been double punched. Now the reason I'm able to do this on more complex shapes like the side of a handbag with its gusset is because my pattern I create digitally. So the pattern is perfectly symmetrical and I know everything's going to line up if I'm following those guide marks, which I'll show you now. So normally when I have to mark these holes, I am going to use my laser to cut out a pattern that has all of the holes perfectly lined up exactly as it was designed in Illustrator. For the purposes of this video, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to use one that I printed out on some cardstock and punched with my awl so that I can show you don't need a laser to do this. What you do need, what I would recommend is that you do have a digital pattern that is perfectly symmetrical. So why is it important that this pattern be symmetrical? Well, it should be pretty obvious. We're going to be stitching from this side on one piece, and then we're going to be flipping this around, and the parts are going to be going together back to back. So if our pattern isn't perfect, if our stitch spacing on our pattern isn't perfectly spaced along each side, along the bottom in this case, then it's not going to line up. That's why I like cutting my patterns out using the laser. Now obviously, like I said, not everybody's going to have a laser, but at least if you design it in Illustrator and it's digital, you know you can be certain that each one of your stitch spacings is symmetrical from side to side, and more importantly, around curves. If you're just dealing with straight lines, and this technique is going to be a bit easier because it's easy to space out your stitch spacing based on your stitching chisels. But around curves, it can definitely get a little bit more tricky. And if the corners of your wallets or project are rounded, then you have to follow that curve. So each of the curves on each side, that stitch spacing needs to be exactly the same. So if you haven't already started using some digital software, something like Adobe Illustrator to make your patterns, I'd very much encourage you to try it. Learn the software because the results are going to dramatically improve, I think, your results. Because if you work with a digitally designed pattern, you know everything is going to be exactly as it's designed, and it's going to be symmetrical. So if you're looking to double punch, you're probably going to want to do that unless you really take care to create your patterns by hand from cardstock and that they're perfectly even. But if you do have patterns that you have designed that aren't digital, or you need them refined to make sure they're perfect for your stitch spacing, you can also contact me. I've done this for many different makers where I digitize the patterns that they have. Sometimes they just prefer to do it on paper, do it by hand. They don't have the time or the skill to maybe make it a digital pattern that they're going to use for their dies. If you are in that situation and you need help with that, send me an email, let me know. and we can get those patterns digitized for you. So the example I'm going to use here to demonstrate the results of this double punch is the front pocket of the Orca wallet. Slightly shorter version, but this is what I'm going to work with. The reason I chose this is because it has rounded corners and it has the curve, which makes the double punch a little bit more challenging to do accurately when you have these corners. So I've got one piece already glued up. This represents, let's say, an assembled wallet that I'm going to punch like normal. Then I'll stitch. You'll see the results of that. I've also got two separate pieces that I'm going to punch each, then glue together, and then stitch. Once that's done, we'll compare the results, and you can be the judge with which one looks better. So I'll go through this, get this one done, and then we'll look at the results of the regular punch. Okay, so here we are at the bench. I am going to get my stitch spacing off of my template I'm going to use for the double punch, just so that everything is perfectly, well, as close to the same as we can get. So this is about 4 millimeter stitch spacing. So that's for my double punch. We'll take this one. This one has already been glued up, which represents your wallet. So we'll put our mark, or our stitch mark, right around. So normally, if I'm just doing this by eye, I need to get my mallet. What I'm going to be doing is hanging the first tooth over the top of the wallet to get my spacing from the edge. Make a little mark. Then I will come down. And this leather marks really well. You can see I just put some light marks right there. Do the same thing from the other side. And then come in with my 2-prong. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3. From this side, go 1, 2, 3. So now what I need to do is connect the dots between those two lines. So I'll take my 5-tooth iron, mark it out, and I'm hoping that this lines up exactly with my hole here. These two holes where the prongs are facing, you can see this is, I'm probably off by about 1/2 mil. So that's pretty good. I'm off just barely off on that corner. You might be able to see it. Those two space ends are just slightly closer than I would normally like them, but good enough for a regular punch. So I'm going to go ahead, commit to that, and punch right through. Okay, so there are typical results. Punching from one side all the way through. So let's get this stitched up. We'll take a look. Okay, so how do I stitch? I'll go over this quickly. Needles are up and away. This is the side I stitched from. So my right hand, my left hand. My right needle just opens up the hole a little bit. Left needle comes through. Right needle goes underneath, and I grab the left needle. So I'm pinching the two needles in my hand. My right needle that's underneath is going to go in between the two threads from the previous hole and then this hole that just came, this thread that just came through. Right needle goes into the middle, cast the thread over top, pull in the direction of the holes. Do that again. Right needle just opens it up. So left needle through, right needle underneath, pinch the needles, pull the thread back. That right needle goes through, cast the thread over, pick up that needle, cinch down. There's no need to be switching hands during this process. So there's no reason to reach around here and grab any needle. So I've seen some people come through, they pull through like this, pick up this needle, and then like pull back like this, and they're like holding the needle here, and then come through and cast. I don't know, I've seen a lot of people use this technique, and there seems to be a lot of excess hand movement. Yeah, they come through like this and then pull the thread back or something. So they got the needle in this hand over here, and then I think they drop it and come through. I'm not sure what they do, but very simple. Left needle, right hand pinches both, pull the thread back, and when you're already holding it here, gets cast over, and don't drop your needle like I just did. Pull nice and tight, even tension. Okay, let's finish this up and then I'll show you the results. So there are the results of the standard way to punch that I'm sure everyone does. The front side, you can see it looks nice and clean. There's a bit of space just between each one of the stitches. Clean, consistent, I like it. Back side, there's a lot less space where the hole is. So the thread is coming through a smaller hole. It's taking up more space and it's kind of hiding any hole that's there. It just looks a little bit tighter, a little bit more compact, still clean and consistent because we did that cast. But this is the standard result of punching straight through to the backside and then stitching with that cast. Okay, so now that we've done that, we can go over, and now I'm going to show you how I do my double punching. So now we're going to do the double punch. So I'm going to take my template, make sure it's lined up perfectly with the bottom and the sides. Now normally what I would do is actually leave this whole piece square so that it matches with the corners. Just makes lining everything up a little bit easier, but I didn't in this case, but that's fine. Lines up perfectly flush with each side and the bottom. So what I'll do now is go through with my awl and make marks at every single hole. Normally what I would do is mark, let's say every 9th hole, every 5th hole, and then mark completely around the corner. Don't technically need to do every one because again, once we put our stitching chisel on this, it's going to span the distance of however many teeth it has. So I'll either do every 9th hole, every 5th hole, but I will definitely do around the corners. So I don't use my wing dividers to mark this line because I'm marking it directly off the pattern. So there you can see all those holes, so those are my guard marks. Once I have those in, I'll punch as normal, but I will then go ahead and glue these pieces together, making sure I only have glue on the underside, but on this side of the stitch hole, because I don't want glue right on my stitch holes because it'll get inside, kind of gum it up, make it a little bit more difficult to stitch. So I'll get these punched, get them glued, and then we'll come back once I'm ready to stitch. One thing I forgot to show you on the other one, I pointed out before I punched it, but not after. The spacing on this is absolutely perfect. around that corner. Because working from my template, I know exactly how far down to start from the top to get that perfect spacing. By simply hanging my tooth over top of the edge, it gives a slightly different spacing, which then impacts it down here. Another reason working from a template can be so beneficial is that it's perfect every time. So let's stitch this, get this glued and then stitch it up. Just before we stitch it up, you can see the glue is to the outside of the stitch line. See it over here and then over here. So I've made sure that no glue or very little glue gets into those stitch holes. Okay, so we're starting the same way with the stitching. This is the side we punched from, but this is also the side we punched from. So in this case, it doesn't matter which side you start from, which can be handy in some cases, but the process is going to be basically the same. This is going to take a little bit more work to get that needle through, which is why it's important to also open up that hole with the right needle. But again, we start left needle comes through, right needle on the bottom to make a T, pull that through, both needles in hand, pull it back, needle goes in the middle, but we don't cast. Just simply pull as normal without the cast. That's the key with the double punch. Because our holes are facing in opposite directions, we don't need to cast. So holes are facing up and away, and then this way they're facing up and away, which when flipped around, it's the opposite. So because the holes on this side are facing me, I don't have to cast, because the X that's formed in the middle is what's going to push that thread up and in the proper direction. So you can see it is a little bit more work in some cases to stitch, but I personally find this is very dependent on the leather. So I sometimes find if you have a thicker veg tan, which is what this is, for some reason it, I don't know why, I haven't been able to figure out why, but it's more difficult to stitch through. Standard stuff that I use, Mexico leather, Wicket and Craig glazed harness, no issues. This one, I don't actually know what this is just from the scrap bin. Can be a little bit more resistance, but you can see that one found it just fine. Another reason you really want to work from a digital pattern is because if these holes are off by anything, I would say more than half a mil, it's going to be very difficult to stitch. That was an issue I ran into early on when I first tried this technique. I was not working from an accurate enough pattern, and the double punch wasn't working out for me. As soon as I started printing out my pattern and marking those stitch holes like I showed you, this became perfect. And you can see here, it's now stitching arguably just as easy as normal. As I get stumbled up here, it's hilarious. So the only thing here to remember with the double punching, again, you don't have to cast. So what can happen is muscle memory can kick in, and you can cast a few of these. So if you do that, it'll kind of screw up the stitch. But I double punch so much now that I have to remember to cast. And it's almost an operation where it's if I'm punching right through, I'm kind of aware of it. Versus before, when I was double punching, I thought, okay, this feels weird to punch both sides. Now it's so normal. Like if I make a long strap for a bag, I punch straight through. I don't double punch straps. It's kind of almost relegated to a strap situation where I punch straight through. Anyway, so now I'm rambling. So we'll cut that here and jump back after we're done, and we'll take a look at the results. Okay, so there is the double punching done. Not more complicated than the regular way to do it, but definitely a few more steps. You got to punch each side first, then glue it together. You really got to take care to make sure that glue is only around the perimeter. It doesn't get into the stitch holes because that will gum it up, make it a little bit more challenging to stitch, but the results I think are worth it. So you can see the front side of the wallet looks as we'd expect it to look. Nice even spacing. We can see still a bit of that hole there. Looks nice and clean. Flip it around, we see the exact same thing. So I think the results right there kind of speak for themselves. Each side is identical. The only difference in stitching technique is that we don't have to cast. So everything I do in the studio is all double punch now. The results to me speak for themselves. Once you get used to the new process, the new flow, it really doesn't take that much longer to get it done. And then when you look at the results, I think it speaks for themselves. So if you have any questions or comments about this technique, please let me know in the comment section below. And if you are looking for any pattern design services, plans, anything like that that you need either reviewed, modified, or created from scratch, shoot me an email and let me know. Also, I still have my supplier discounts linked in the description below. Norfolk 10 at checkout for everyone listed there. It gets you 10% off your next order. If you want to support this channel and the work that I'm doing here, you can click the join button. I've got 3 different subscription levels. That is the most direct way to support me and the work that I'm doing here. So as usual, thank you guys for watching. We'll see you in the next one.